My name's Trevor, I'm 27, and until last Christmas, I would have described my family the way people describe an old couch. Worn, a little lumpy, but familiar enough that you don't question it. Not warm, not safe, just known. I'm the middle child of 3, which is basically the human version of being the middle seat on a plane. You exist. People step over you. Sometimes they use your armrest like it belongs to them. My older sister Rachel, 31, has always been the loud one. The kind of person who can walk into a quiet room and make it feel like a stage. She could turn a grocery store trip into a performance. She laughed first, laughed loudest, and never missed a chance to be the narrator of everyone else's life. My younger brother Liam, 24, is the golden retriever type. Sweet, goofy, everyone's friend. The kind of guy who could spill punch on your shoes and still somehow make you apologize for being in the splash zone. And then there was me, the quiet one. The one who read books on the stairs during family parties, the one who washed dishes after dinner without being asked, mostly because standing at the sink was easier than sitting at the table pretending I wasn't a target. The one who didn't take up much space because, in our family, space was something you had to fight Rachel for. I didn't hate it at first. I told myself I liked being private. I told myself I was mature. I told myself that not needing attention was a strength. But growing up with Rachel taught me something different. Privacy isn't always a personality trait. Sometimes it's armor. Rachel's jokes were never the playful kind. They weren't, haha, you snore jokes. They were precision tools. She could find the one tender spot you didn't even know you'd exposed and press down until you flinched. When I was 16, I wrote a poem in English class, something painfully sincere about feeling invisible. Rachel found it in my backpack, photocopied it, and taped it to the refrigerator like a trophy. When our cousins came over, she read the first few lines out loud in a dramatic theater voice and bowed like she'd just performed Shakespeare. Everyone laughed. My face burned. My mom said, "Oh, Rachel, stop." But she was smiling when she said it, like the joke was cute. Like my humiliation was an adorable family moment. My dad didn't look up from the TV. That's the pattern I grew up in. Rachel throws a dart, I bleed a little, everyone calls it teasing. So I learned to keep the soft parts hidden. I learned to lock my door. I learned to talk less. I learned to make myself smaller in rooms where she got bigger. And I wrote. Writing was the only place where I could take a full breath. It was where my thoughts stopped ricocheting off my skull and lined up like they were finally ready to be understood. I wrote about everything. Awkward crushes, work anxiety, the way my chest tightened when someone asked, "So, what's new with you?" Like they expected the answer to be entertaining. I wrote letters to future versions of myself. I wrote promises. I wrote the things I couldn't say out loud because saying them would have made them real. And in my house, real feelings were treated like clutter. So when I came home for Christmas last year, I brought my journal with me. Not because I planned to share it, not because I wanted drama, because it was a habit, a survival routine. I wrote before bed the way some people take medication. It helped my nervous system remember that I still belonged to myself, even when I was back under my parents' roof. My childhood room was mostly intact. Same faded posters, same dent in the carpet where my desk used to sit. Rachel had moved out years ago. Liam was in the guest room. I figured it was safe. I tucked my journal into the back of a drawer under an old hoodie and went downstairs. Dinner was tolerable. There were the usual jabs. My aunt asking if I was still doing that writing thing, like it was a phase. Rachel asking, loud enough for everyone to hear, if I had finally joined a dating app or was I still doing the monk lifestyle. Liam making jokes about my old man energy because I didn't want a third beer. My dad, as always, complained about the turkey. My mom tried to keep the peace with forced laughter and her famous peppermint bark. For a second, just a second, I thought maybe the holiday would pass without stepping on a landmine. Maybe everyone would go home. Maybe I'd make it through. Then dessert hit the table. Rachel cleared her throat, which should have been my first warning. She was smiling in that way she always smiled right before she did something funny. And in her hands was a worn black notebook, my notebook. My stomach didn't just drop, it fell through the floor. For half a heartbeat, I told myself it couldn't be. She wouldn't. Even Rachel wouldn't go that far. Then she held it up like she was presenting a prize on a game show. "Okay," she said, voice bright and theatrical. "I found something in Trevor's room that is, honestly, pure gold." The room laughed before she even said what it was. Like the audience had been trained, like everyone already knew their role. My mom's eyes widened slightly. Not shock, more like annoyance that Rachel had chosen this moment. My dad smirked into his drink. Liam looked at me with that nervous half grin people wear when they can feel something bad happening, but don't want to be the one who stops it. Rachel flipped the journal open. "Apparently," she said, "our little introvert has been keeping secrets." I heard my own pulse in my ears. My hands went cold. My throat tightened so fast it felt like my body was trying to swallow itself. "Rachel," I managed, finally finding a voice. "Give it back." "Oh, relax," she said, not even looking at me. "This is hilarious." Then she started reading, not paraphrasing, not summarizing, not teasing around the edges, word for word, in her loud, performative voice, like she was auditioning for a one-woman show titled My Brother's Private Thoughts. She read an entry about a girl at a bookstore, how I thought she smiled at me, how it made my whole day, how I felt stupid for caring. She read an entry where I admitted I practiced conversations in the mirror before meetings because I was terrified of sounding incompetent. She read the one where I wrote, "Sometimes I feel like I'm the background character in my own family." That line hit the room like a spark. Everyone laughed. Even my dad, who didn't laugh at much, chuckled and shook his head like I was telling a cute story at my own expense. My mom said, "Rachel, okay, that's enough." But she said it the way you tell someone to stop tickling, not the way you stop something cruel. She was smiling. Her eyes were shiny with amusement. Rachel kept going. She found the entry after my panic attack, the one where I wrote to myself like I was trying to talk a drowning person back to shore. "I know it feels like you're broken," she read, voice suddenly mock serious. "But you're not. You're just tired. Keep going." Rachel paused and looked up, making a face like she just discovered a melodramatic soap opera. "Aw," she cooed. "Trevor's giving himself motivational speeches." The room exploded. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the way a thread snaps when it's been pulled too tight for too long. I don't even remember standing up. I only remember the chair scraping, the heat flooding my face, the taste of metal in my mouth like my body had decided fear needed a flavor. I walked over. I grabbed the journal out of Rachel's hands. She resisted for a second, just enough to make it a tug of war, just enough to prove she still thought she was in control. Then I turned and walked out the front door. No speech, no yelling, no explanation. Because if I tried to talk, I would have cried. And crying in that room would have become another joke, another clip, another classic Trev moment. I left in a hoodie with my keys and my journal clenched so hard my knuckles hurt. No one followed me. That part is what I remember most clearly. Not the laughter, not Rachel's voice. The fact that nobody came after me. Like I'd walked out during a commercial break and they assumed I'd be back by the next scene. I drove around for an hour with no destination, just headlights and numbness. At some point, I pulled into a dark parking lot behind a closed pharmacy and sat there staring at the steering wheel like it could explain what had just happened. I didn't go back to my parents' house that night. I slept on the pull-out couch at my friend Jordan's place, still in the hoodie, still holding my journal like it was a piece of my body. Jordan didn't ask a million questions. He just handed me a glass of water, nodded toward the couch, and said, "You're safe here." I didn't realize how badly I needed someone to say that until my throat started burning. 2 days later, the first messages came. Rachel left a voicemail. "Come on, Trev, it was just a joke. Don't be so dramatic." My mom texted, "Rachel didn't mean anything by it. Please come home. Everyone misses you." Liam sent me a meme about being too soft. A meme. That was what I got after the worst humiliation of my life. A meme and the same old script. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Something had broken that night and they didn't even see it. To them, it was an embarrassing moment, a funny story, a little holiday entertainment. To me, it was the confirmation of something I'd spent years trying not to name. They weren't safe. And the worst part was the way they acted confused, like I'd disappeared for no reason. 3 weeks after Christmas, Rachel posted a video on her Instagram story. It was shaky, short, filmed from across the dinner table. You couldn't hear the words clearly, but you could hear my name and the laughter. Caption: "When your brother writes a rom-com in his diary and you find it had hundreds, then thousands of views. People commented things like savage and sibling energy and he'll laugh about it one day." Rachel replied, "He's still pouting somewhere. Classic Trev." I watched it once. Then I felt something inside me go cold in a way I'd never felt before. Not anger, not sadness, a kind of brittle clarity. I reported the video. It stayed up. That night I called Jordan and I said, "I don't think they even like me." Jordan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I don't think they've ever learned how to love someone they can't control." 2 weeks after that, I started therapy. I didn't tell my family. Not because it was shameful, but because they would have turned it into a story. A joke. Proof that I was too sensitive. My therapist was a calm woman named Diane, with soft gray curls and a voice that made silence feel less dangerous. I told her everything. Rachel's jokes, my parents shrugging, the journal. When I finished, I waited for her to say something like, "Well, she probably didn't mean it." Instead, Diane said, "That wasn't a joke. That was humiliation. And the way your family dismissed it is part of the harm." Hearing it put that way felt like someone finally turned on a light in a room I'd been stumbling through for years. I started noticing patterns I'd always normalized. How my parents excused Rachel because she was spirited. How Liam stayed neutral, which somehow always aligned with whoever was loudest. How I'd spent my life trying to be easy to live with because being difficult meant becoming a target. Therapy didn't fix me overnight. It didn't turn me into a new person. It just helped me stop blaming myself for needing respect. I unfollowed them all on social media, quietly. No announcements. I turned off message previews so their names wouldn't jump scare me during meetings, and I stopped writing in my journal, at least not in a notebook. I bought a password-protected app. I started treating my words like something valuable again. But outside of therapy, life started slipping. I fell behind at work. I missed deadlines. I stared at my screen for hours, cursor blinking like it was mocking me. My boss pulled me aside one day and said, "This isn't like you, Trevor. Are you okay?" I lied. "Just burned out." He nodded, but the concern didn't leave his eyes. Rock bottom wasn't a dramatic crash. It was waking up one morning, opening my laptop, and feeling absolutely nothing. No urgency, no motivation, just a hollow static. That's when it hit me. No one was coming to catch me, not my family. And if I didn't catch myself, I would keep falling. So I started small. I made my bed every morning. I drank water like it was a task. I went for 10 10-minute walks even when my body felt heavy. Tiny invisible victories like stacking bricks in the dark, trusting that eventually something would resemble a wall. Then strangely, a stranger helped. There was a coffee shop a few blocks from my apartment. Quiet, soft jazz. Baristas who didn't force small talk. I started going there with my laptop just to sit with it again, like being near it might remind my brain what it felt like to create. One afternoon, a woman across from me, mid-30s, tired eyes, non-profit lanyard, sighed at her screen and muttered, "This grant application is going to end me." I smiled without thinking. I said that about a grocery list yesterday. She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and warm. "You're a writer?" she asked. It had been months since I'd thought of myself that way, but I nodded. Her name was Becca. She wrote grant proposals and fundraising letters for a small non-profit. We talked for a few minutes, nothing deep, just enough to remember that conversation could be kind, that it didn't have to be a performance. We exchanged emails. I offered to glance at her draft. She offered to buy my next coffee. It wasn't romantic, it was something better, a gentle reminder that the world outside my family still contained decent people. That night, I opened a folder on my computer where I'd kept old writing, short stories, essays, unfinished drafts. I found a piece I'd abandoned a year earlier. It was about emotional invisibility, about growing up in the orbit of a loud sibling, about how some families confuse cruelty with bonding. I'd stopped writing it because it felt too personal, but now it felt like the one honest thing I had left. So I finished it. A week of revisions, too much caffeine, a few moments where I had to sit on my bathroom floor because the memories hit too hard. Then I submitted it anonymously to a small digital magazine I'd always admired but never had the courage to pitch. I didn't tell anyone. I just hit submit and tried not to obsess. A month later, I woke up to an email. "We loved your piece. We'd be honored to feature it in our March issue." I read it 3 times before my brain accepted it. Then it went live, and people started responding, not laughing, responding. Comments like, "This hit too close to home." I thought I was the only one. "It feels like you wrote the words I've been choking on for years." One person wrote, "I felt seen." That sentence broke something open in me in the best way, because I realized it wasn't that I was too sensitive. It was that I'd been surrounded by people who benefited from treating sensitivity like a flaw. I started writing every day again, essays, reflections, fiction. I started a Substack. I posted weekly. At first it was a few readers, then a few hundred, then 1,000. Strangers emailed me their stories. People thanked me. People told me they'd finally set boundaries because of something I wrote. It wasn't therapy, but it was close. It was connection without humiliation. Work stabilized too. I got back on track, landed a new client. My boss messaged me during a team meeting. "Glad to have you back." But I wasn't the old Trevor. The old Trevor would have gone to Rachel's wedding out of obligation. The old Trevor would have laughed politely while swallowing the sting. Because yes, around Valentine's Day, I got a wedding invitation. Rachel was engaged to a guy named Matt, someone she'd been dating for 6 months. It was fast and flashy and plastered all over Instagram with captions like, "When you know, you know," and hashtags about forever. The invitation was thick, expensive, gold-foiled like it wanted to impress me into compliance. Inside was a note. "Hope to see you there, little bro. XOXO, Rachel and Matt." Like nothing had happened, like she hadn't turned my private thoughts into party entertainment and internet content. I stared at the invitation for a long time, not because I was tempted, because I was fascinated by the audacity. It wasn't just the wedding, it was the pattern, the expectation that I would always be the one to smooth things over, that my boundaries were optional, that my pain was negotiable. I didn't RSVP, I let the deadline pass in silence, and that silence for the first time felt powerful. Rachel left another voicemail. "Are you seriously ignoring me over a notebook? Grow up." My mom sent a long email about forgiveness and family and how we all make mistakes. No one ever said, "That was cruel." No one ever said, "We failed you." Not until spring, because by then, my writing had grown enough that a bigger site reached out. The editor said my voice had quiet power. She asked if I'd write a guest column. I hadn't planned on writing about my family again, but when I read her email, something clicked. This wasn't just my story, it was a lot of people's story. So I wrote an essay. I didn't name Rachel, I didn't name my parents, I didn't mention the town. The title was simple: "The Night My Privacy Became Entertainment." I wrote it carefully, not with rage, but with clarity. I described the way humiliation looks when it's disguised as humor, the way laughter can be a weapon when everyone pretends it's harmless. I described the aftermath, the denial, the gaslighting, the "you're too sensitive," the way the victim becomes the problem for not smiling. I wrote about boundaries, about leaving, about how walking away isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the only way to stop bleeding. The essay went live on a Monday. By Wednesday, it was everywhere. Therapists shared it, advocacy pages reposted it, Reddit threads picked it up. People sent it to friends with captions like, This is what I've been trying to explain." My inbox flooded, and then something I didn't expect happened. People from my life started recognizing it. A cousin messaged, "Wait, was this about Christmas? I was there. I didn't realize. I'm sorry." Then another. Then an old family friend. The cracks formed quietly like ice breaking on a lake. Rachel still didn't reach out, not directly, but the Christmas video disappeared from her profile that week. No explanation, just gone. For someone like Rachel, that was an earthquake because control over the narrative was her oxygen. A few days before the wedding, I texted her for the first time since Christmas. One message, "Hey, I'm not coming. I hope you've learned that some stories aren't yours to tell." No anger, no threats, just truth. She didn't reply, but the next morning, Liam texted me, "Dudes, what did you do?" I didn't answer because I hadn't done anything except stop being silent. The wedding happened without me. I didn't crash it. I didn't contact vendors. I didn't sabotage anything. I stayed home. I made coffee. I went for a run. I wrote. But the story didn't stay contained. People whispered. People asked questions. The essay kept circulating. Somewhere between the reception and the honeymoon, Rachel's polished image started to feel less polished. She made her Instagram private. She archived old posts. She stopped posting for a while. Liam later told me she spent a lot of the reception checking her phone and snapping at bridesmaids, demanding to know who leaked things. As if shame is something you catch like a virus instead of something you create. The fallout didn't come like lightning. It came like weather. Slow pressure. Thick air, the kind of storm you can't blame on one moment. And then, unexpectedly, my mom emailed me. Not a voicemail, not a text full of emojis. An email with the subject line, "I read what you wrote." It was 3 paragraphs. The first was defensive. The second tried to explain Rachel away like she was a force of nature. But the third paragraph was different. It said, "I laughed that night. I didn't stop her. I told myself it was teasing. But reading your words made me see your face again at that table. And I realized you were trying not to disappear. I'm sorry we didn't protect you. I'm sorry we didn't listen. You didn't deserve that." It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix everything. But it was the first time anyone in my family wrote the truth without trying to turn it into my fault. I cried when I read it. Not because I was broken, because I finally felt something shift, like one locked door had cracked open. Rachel never apologized. Not directly. She posted a cryptic story once, black screen, white text. "Be careful who you make the villain in your story. They might be writing the book." It disappeared after 24 hours. I screenshot it anyway. Not out of spite, out of irony. Because she was right in a way she didn't understand. I was writing the book, just not the one where she was the hero. Now it's been months. My Substack passed 10,000 subscribers recently. I've done a couple podcast interviews. A small publisher reached out about compiling my essays into a book about emotional boundaries and family dynamics. People still ask me, "Did your sister ever apologize?" And the honest answer is no. But I don't need her to anymore, because the thing I wanted wasn't an apology. Not really. What I wanted was to stop feeling like my softness was a joke. I wanted to stop living like a background character in my own story. And the strangest part is, I didn't get there by yelling, or revenge, or making a scene. I got there by doing what I always did. I wrote. Only this time, I wrote with the knowledge that my voice wasn't something fragile to hide in a drawer. It was something solid, something real. And once you build a life where you can finally breathe, you don't go back to rooms that taught you to hold your breath just to survive. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing them to reach people who never met me halfway. And for the first time in my life, that silence feels like peace.